Okay.
And I have Counselor Tim Rudd at large and Counselor Latoya Allen. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves.
I'm Greg Lowe, Chief Policy Officer for the city.
Frank Kaliva, the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you. And I'm going to start by asking both of you to kind of give us an overview of what's been going on downstairs and your highs, your lows, and where you're looking to go.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. This year, probably the most significant change in the structure of the budget is that the mayor has divided the budget into three significant pieces. His office, the Office of Administration, my office, and the Office of Communication, Mr. Lowe's office. What we're looking to do is to begin to streamline some of the administrative and communication functions across the enterprise, if you will, of the city. And we want to do that in a very transparent manner. So by breaking those out from the mayor's office as we begin to pull some of those business processes and people into a more centralized functional operation, we'll have a better view, and you will have a better view of it as well. So that's really kind of the vision of the future. We think that there's some significant opportunities for greater efficiency across the city, and that this is going to allow us to structure it and provide a view to it at the same time.
All right. You have nothing? Okay, so we're going to go. I'm going to start on this end with Counselor Green.
So page 73, can you just break out that professional services line?
Office of Communications.
Counselor, tell me what your specific question is on page 73.
The professional services line, what does that entail?
The professional services line is the salary of one employee in the group, if we're talking about the 40,019. Is that what you're looking at?
No, the 69,000.
I'm looking at personal services.
Page 73 for your reference.
69,10.
Under the header contractual and other expenses,
It's your
fine.
I believe that is represented as under professional services, the salary of the Director of Marketing and Communications, with some other items connected to it, I believe, some of the out-of-pocket costs.
So typically contractual means like not an employee, right? So
I believe that position is, actually, Counselor, I'm not certain why it's considered contractual, but it is the professional services position of the Director of Marketing and Communications based on the other document. It's under SURA. It's under SURA still.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Counselor Bay.
Not yet. Come back.
Yes, sir. Counselor Thompson.
Frank, you spoke about better efficiencies. Tell us how these efficiencies are going to be better than they are now.
3 weeks into it, Counselor, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, particularly around the way we manage the city's finances. I think we can better use the technology that's available to us. There's a significant number of financial tools and human resources tools that we're just not leveraging appropriately. So by consolidating those under an administrative function, along with the consolidating technology itself under an administrative function, I think we have some opportunity to take a look at the underlying business processes and to look for a significant amount of efficiency, yes, but I think we can be considerably more effective as well. It's too dispersed. It's too inconsistent. We have a significant amount of redundancy across the entire city, and you know, these things swing, right? The pendulum swings, and right now the pendulum is swinging towards centralizing as much as we can, particularly in those three areas.
Thank you.
Counselor, if I could just add in terms of efficiencies or improvements regarding communications, just to briefly address what our current approach is and what we hope to see happen. I think all of you are probably aware that currently the communication staff in the mayor's office provides direct support and communication services to virtually every department in the city. So for example, when there is an issue involving a road closure or a sanitation matter, it is the staff in the mayor's office that provides that support. We also work very closely with departments that have some communications, public information capacity there. And so our goal by breaking this out is to be able to create a better environment where we can all, as we do now, but to continue to improve how we work together, how we potentially share duties to get make more of the investments that the city makes in communications and public information.
Thank you.
Counselor Bren. That's easier for me.
Shorter, right?
I'm going to ask you to come back to me, Madam President.
Okay. Counselor Rudd?
I hear from people that we suddenly spend too much on PR and like marketing and all that, but I actually think that the spending on like constructing narratives for Syracuse is pretty well, is a necessity in our community to change the narrative and to get people on board. So while I'm going to be the first to deconstruct all the stuff you put together, in general, I think it's a good thing. That's my comment. And then I don't really have any questions about your direct budget, but I do have a question as to how do you, so it seems like there's savings all over. You mentioned the low-hanging fruit in finance departments, but how, as the executive department, do you plan to incentivize different departments to find savings and put them forward? For instance, how can you incentivize the IT, the accountability and performance folks to find savings to essentially fund their own operation? I feel like there could almost be incentives. Do you see ways that we can find low-hanging fruit across the whole city and use it to, for instance, I could imagine the performance and accountability folks having like $100,000 of their budget that's dependent on finding $150,000 in savings somewhere else, and we give them 75% credit for the dollars that they save us to put toward their own operation, so that we're incenting people to find savings wherever they may be. So giving credit. It could be an internal department. Like if a department identifies a way to save money, how are they not just giving up their money, but incented to do the right thing, so to speak?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem because over 30 years or so of doing this in enterprises large and small, the component that is always the most interesting is the human component. So why would I give up control over some significant part of my budget if not? So it's really changing a mindset. So incentives work in some environments. I have not seen them work as well in not-for-profit environments. This is my first time working in a municipal, so I don't know whether incentives will work, but there's a variety of different approaches to managing change and helping people to manage change. Part of it is putting an infrastructure in place, and I've begun to work with the folks in API to put together a framework that you can replicate throughout the organization, and to find a champion in each of those high-cost areas who can be a leader and help foment the change. If incentives are the right approach, we'll look at incentives. I'm not sure whether those would work or not, but it's certainly something we should look at.
That's all.
Counselor Allen?
Yes.
That's always the case. That's true.
Here we go. All right, thank you.
Okay, so on page 72, there's a research and communications officer. So what's the difference between I know we have a research department here, and then also our I-team or the innovations office, they do some research. So what's the difference, and do they ever intertwine, those three?
Frankly, Counselor, I think it's just an antiquated titling structure that shows in the budget. There is no crossover with research there. That's a public information officer.
Okay, so this isn't so the person that's actually doing this job isn't in your office?
No, this person is in our office,
Okay.
and it is a public information coordinator, public information officer.
Okay,
I'm merely referencing that the reference in research in this case appears to be an outdated title.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Are you done, Counselor?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Bay.
Thank you. Well, Counselor Allen just got one of the answers I was looking for. I have a few questions. Nothing major, I don't think. Page 67, under the 415 line, 64,876. I see that it's greatly reduced. I'm assuming that's just contractual, primarily outside services.
Correct.
See, that wasn't too bad. Page 70. See that this, I'm assuming this is part of the change we're talking about with the created of the office, because I noticed that in the Director of Administration is not funded 2019.
Right. So rather than funding the Director of Administration, the Office of Administration was created, and my salary is the only salary in there.
So is that an office?
I'm sorry?
It's just your office. That's a joke.
That was my bad, Eric.
All right, I got you. It's all right. So I guess it's a similar question that I have for the Office of Communications. I'm assuming that's one person as well, and not actually an office with more than one person in it?
Talking about page 73, Counselor?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, so just, if you can indulge me a little bit here. What's the significance of the change? From, for example, having a Director of Administration to having an Office of Administration. The change of the language means something.
I think
What does it do?
Yeah, the change of language, you're right, vocabulary is important. The change is an indicator that the mayor wants to look very closely at the way we manage administrative functions. So by moving all of those, personnel in particular, moving over, maintaining IT in a single place, and finance, the mayor, I think, is signaling that he truly expects some of the final efficiencies that we need to achieve in order to achieve a balanced budget are going to happen there. Not solely there. Some of them are still going to happen in operations. And it's important, as I said in the beginning, that there's transparency to that. So by making it an office, it allows for that visibility. This is going to build out over the next 2 years, but you'll have a very clear visibility to it. And you, as we come back and this page gets populated, you'll be able to compare it in previous years and ask about the changes that we've made, and it'll be very, very clear.
That makes sense. Okay. Appreciate that. Make sure I'm in the right place. Two last questions. Because with the change of, from maybe title to office or whatever, any of these charter titles that's been changed? Any of these titles that's changing, mentioned in the charter?
Not to my knowledge, but I'll confirm that and get back to you. I don't believe any title changes have taken place.
Yeah, I'm specifically interested in the administration title because, I could be wrong, but I thought it may have been in there, but it probably wasn't. But if you could clarify that.
I will.
I appreciate it. Last thing I have, I thought Councilor Green's question was actually pretty interesting. When you think about contractual services, I don't know if that question has ever been asked before, has it, Nader? It has? You remember what the answer was? Because I think it's an interesting question to ask. It's listed under professional services or contractual services. Am I right? It's just under professional services?
Professional services.
Which in its language implies outsourcing. Yes, no?
It certainly implies it.
It's not what it is.
Right, well, we know that's not what it is. I don't know, that just creates an interesting dynamic. I thought the question was pretty.
So strictly, let's take it out of the Office of Communications and talk about it strictly from an administrative standpoint.
Right.
It's bad administration. It's not clear. And any time that you obfuscate the way money is being spent, you're doing a disservice to the folks that are putting the money up, right? So in this case, the taxpayers.
I agree with that.
So our goal over the next couple of years would be absolutely to reduce that obfuscation. So that was a position, candidly, that I think we had earmarked to move onto the payroll. Through the course of the budget process, we did a little bit of rushing at the end. It didn't move, but it certainly is one that will move in the future, as will others. We've moved, I think the number is we've moved 3 FTEs in the last, since the last budget from SURA to the general city budget, and the goal will be to move more of those. It should be clear, it should be concise, it should be understandable. So the point is well taken, and our intent, I think, is pretty clear.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilor Driscoll, you have anything?
Yeah, just when you spoke to redundancies that you're seeing citywide, I mean, could you identify some of those? Where do you think those are?
So I think primarily in personnel. We have personnel functions that are taking place, and you heard this in one of the previous hearings. We have personnel functions that are taking place both centrally and out in departments. My biggest concern about that is consistency, but I'm also concerned that there's redundancy as well. So we're not doing it as well. So for example, if we have an expert out in the field that understands workers' comp and is doing workers' comp solely for one of the larger departments, why not leverage that across the other departments as well? And rather than having somebody who doesn't know it as well, maybe only does 1 or 2 cases a year, muddle their way through it rather than leveraging that expertise. So it's those kinds of things. We see the same in finance. I'm normally, in finance in particular, human resources, I'm a pretty big fan of solid centralization. Finance, you can make the argument that there are nuances in finance that require finance officers out in the field, but I think in the case of the city, we're better off consolidating that first, making sure that we're leveraging PeopleSoft in the same way across it's our core accounting system. It's being used differently across the city. We need to ensure that it's being used the same way in every department. The best way to do that is to centralize. If at some point in the future we need to go back after we've established that core functionality and the departments feel strongly that they need an embedded finance officer, I'm fine with that. As I say, it's a pendulum. Right now, we need to ferret out where everybody is and what they're doing, get them all together on the same technology, and then decide where we go from there.
Great. And do you feel we'll be able to address some of that redundancy in the coming year?
Oh, I'm convinced of it.
Process.
Absolutely. We're certainly going to be able to identify it, and we'll be able to solve some of it. We won't be able to solve all of it in a year.
I saw Madam President, Councilor Rudd seemed very eager. I didn't mean as a dig. I meant really, he had his hand up.
I was, but I lost my eagerness. No. So back to that Green Day series of questions. So the position, it's a 0 head count in the communications, and then it shows up as 1 head count in SURA. Is that how it works? The one that's in professional services?
Yep, that's correct.
So it's not like it's a 0 in both places.
To my knowledge, it couldn't be correct, Mary. It'd be 1 in, this position would translate to 1 in SURA. Yeah.
But it does bring up the issue of head count overall, and the issue of unfunded vacancies and making the head count reflect the actual funding available. So it does not, the head count does not reflect the funding availability right now. So why can't we change that now? Why can't we take the unfunded head count across the city and just eliminate it right now?
Yeah, I heard that question at the previous hearing, Counselor, and to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question. There are, it is not an approach that I'm accustomed to. I'm also not willing to say that there isn't some historical or other reason why we haven't done that. So I would hesitate to say, you know, let's just do it the way you and I would necessarily want it approached. May or may not be the most efficacious. So I want to defer on that one until I've had a chance to look at it.
I would just add, I know that it's often cited that we want to maintain the civil service title, but I would say the transparency value of having a head count that reflects reality would be greater than whatever degree of spontaneity is enabled by having open civil service titles. I mean, we can always go get the civil service title back or create a new one that might be even more appropriate than the previous one. So I would encourage us, to the extent possible, adjusting down the headcount in this cycle to do it, and if we don't have enough information for that now, to definitely make it a priority for 1 year that the headcount reflect the funding.
I think that's good advice. Thank you.
That's all.
Can you give me an example? Frank, I think you mentioned that this bifurcation or trifurcation of the 3 different mayor's office functions will assist the departments. For example, you mentioned communications as being a way to facilitate the departments getting their communications needs met. Can you give an example of how under the prior organization that might have been less organized, and how under this new organization a department head would see the difference, would see the improvement?
So let me take it out of communications. I'll defer to Mr. Lowe on that, but let me put it in the area that I know better, which is finance. So right now we have multiple treasury, what I would consider treasury and payments functions. It is not a safe way for us to be managing the city's money, to have intake points at a variety of different places. Now, it's not as awful. We don't manage as much cash as we used to when we're moving away from literal cash. That said, you'll see in our audit that our auditors have pointed that out. So having multiple points of payments, multiple points of invoicing is just asking for there to be errors and potentially points of fraud. So that right there, while it's convenient, it is much easier for a department to manage its own accounts receivable and accounts payable. It's not appropriate, and we can, using technology, make it easier for them. It's never going to be as convenient for them. They're going to have to give up a little bit of that. I think it's worth it.
I agree. I read the auditor's report, and I agree, and I think that makes sense. I'm thinking from you specifically highlighted communication today, so I wanted to give Greg an opportunity.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I think one of the best examples of where we're starting to do this, and we can do this more, is in the area of communications measurement and reporting, where it doesn't make sense to duplicate across multiple departments the metrics process of communications. It can use the same tools, and we don't need to buy them multiple times. We don't need to see the fire department acquire a social media management tool or put its staff on trying to track the results. We should do that one time across multiple departments. That's the approach we're starting, and department heads will benefit from that as they look at that information and make decisions about how they deploy public information.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and with our whole 3 minutes to go, I'm going to ask you my question. So with all the professional services, we're going to zero everything out, because I'm looking and everything is zeroing out, right?
That is certainly the intent at some point, Madam President. When that is, that timeline, I don't know. I can't answer specifically,
For
but
2020, so I'm thinking that 2020 will be zeroed out. Right?
understood.
And I want to look at the indicators on page 74. priorities and identified. So we've met our priorities because we're dropping from 11 to 5. So we've met the majority of the priorities that you're looking for with the indicators?
On the, this is API?
Yes.
Okay. So they have met that number of priority indicators as identified that year. Those are constantly shifting. So as priorities are met, new priorities will be introduced. So this is simply a snapshot in time.
So we've met 6 out of the 11. Oh, good job. Okay.
We'll let them. They have an hour with you, I think, next week, and I think they'll be delighted to hear that.
On that point, I mean, I think it's really indicative that the indicators for the Office of Accountability, Performance, and Innovation basically mean nothing. Priorities identified, partnerships established, measurement metrics created, policies, initiatives implemented. Like, that sums up the value of these activity indicators that are within the budget right there. They don't mean much. They're not specific. They're not understandable. They might mean something, they may not. It certainly doesn't mean much to anybody who's not working in the department. And this is the Office of Accountability, Performance, and Innovation.
So the only thing I'd suggest there, Counselor, is that these are the indicators that they are managing. These are not their indicators. So this is the performance scorecard that they are managing on behalf of the entire city, which we'd be happy to go through with you. I think you'd find that it is pretty specific in many areas.
The green, yellow, red.
Alrighty. Well, if you could send those over to us. So
Absolutely.
We can,
Happy to.
Anything else from this table?
That's it.
No? Introductions for anybody that don't know who's sitting here. To my right, Counselor Joe Driscoll. To my right, Counselor Khalid Bey, Counselor Stephen Thompson, Counselor Brin, Counselor Rudd, Counselor Allen, and I'm President Hudson. And
I'm the city clerk, John Capanis, and you were right, Council President. It's page 113 is what we're going to start on, if you want to do the clerk's office first.
alrighty, thank you. This time I'm going to start on my left. Counselor Allen, you have anything? Alrighty, Counselor Rudd.
I think your activity indicators are maybe the best in the entire budget.
Thank you. I would like to just give a quick overview on DocuPet. In the last year, you may recall, we had a committee meeting about a year ago, and we hired a company called DocuPet out of Canada that is helping us increase participation in dog licensing. Dog licensing across the board is a very low participation rate, not just in Syracuse, but throughout the country. So this company from Canada, which we're fortunate not only does our work, but moved to Syracuse to make their office in Syracuse for their North American expansion, and they're in the incubator center at Mutual, New York. What their process is what I can't do as a government. They can offer incentives. They can go to Petco and get coupons and mail them out and say, do you know your dog needs to have his renewal, and incentivize them, as well as use the stick approach, which is what government can do. So since we've hired them and they've been in place for less than a year, we've had 11% increase in participation. We expect that to continue to rise. Starting this spring, this is the first time they're going to do this, they're doing a door-to-door campaign where they're dropping off literature, reminding people about the process, giving incentives to encourage people to license their dog. This is not only good because it's legally required, but it also helps us with getting people back with their pets if they get lost. They have a system where they're 24 hours a day. You can go online. You can create a Facebook page for your pet. There's all kinds of information that they do. They'll help us with foster parenting pets that are missing. We waited to do this until the Walsh administration came on because we wanted to include dog control. I handle licensing, but Parks handles dog control. So this program helps both departments. So when Parks comes up, they can explain to you the advantages of DocuPet with their operations. But I just want to let you know the program's in force. It was was an initiative we had in the last year. It's moving forward, and I think it's been a success to date.
Okay, I do have a question now.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, how much revenue a year do we actually take in from license and certificates?
About $60,000.
60,000.
Approximately. from marriage license, dog licenses,
And that's all city, like that doesn't have to be?
that's our share, yeah.
Okay.
That's our percentage. We take in more than that, and then we have to give it to the state. Most of those licenses are state-issued license. Like, we only get a percentage of the marriage license, and the rest of it goes to the state of New York.
Okay.
You all done?
Yes.
Councilor Rudd, you done?
Do you have any unfunded headcount?
Well, the other thing we've done in the past year, because I know you wanted to know about initiatives and other budget hearings, is we applied to the research department, which we were successful in securing a local records management grant, because a lot of our records, historic archival records, are in old binders and books, and some of them are on microfilm. So we secured a $46,000 grant, and we're in the process of converting a lot of our old volumes and microfilm into a more easier to research and easier to pull up information, because lots of times people come in and they need historic information and we have to pull it out of a ledger book, which is how it was done 50 years ago. So now we're trying to update our records, and we're very happy to have worked with the research department who secured this grant, and this is just, again, another way to update our office operations and make it more user-friendly for the public. So we're in the process of that. Grant is in process right now. Shortly, they should be, by the end of this year for sure, we'll have everything up and running.
And that'll be for a new employee?
No, it's to help our current employees access information. The information is stored in a very outdated method. So it'll be easier on the computer to pull up the records rather than have to go get them off the shelf.
That means digitizing records? Is that what we're, is that the
Some
summary?
of them, yes, yeah.
Okay.
The ones we can't do everything. The ones we use most frequently.
Is there a way to make that accessible to the public as opposed to public employees?
Well, for example, marriage licenses are not public information. It has to be over 50 years old to be an archival document that's open to the public. Otherwise, I have to have the permission of the two people of the license to release the information. So not all of our documents are public, but the ones that are public, we could do that.
Done?
No, that's my other question.
Do you have any unfunded headcount?
Oh, no. Just to recap, all of our positions are accepted by County Civil Service. We have no SURA funding. We don't use our 415 line for that purposes. And over the years, my background in personnel has made me able to not only take care of my office, but your office in a way in which all the positions are properly categorized and accepted by our County Civil Service.
Well, I thank you for that. Thank you.
With regard to public document copies, is there a good reason why this number has gone down, especially in light of your discussion of the grant that makes public documents more accessible to your staff?
What happened is a lot of that money is for marriage license copies, certified copies of marriage licenses. When the ACA went into effect and a lot of different things, a lot of employers required people to prove their marriage license. And that's kind of petering off a little bit now, but there was a rush on people getting copies, certified copies of their license for their health insurance purposes at work. And so that's why that number was peaked up and then it's coming down a little.
So that 127 was more inflated as a historical.
Slightly inflated, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
And I'm gonna ask a kind of silly question. What's the difference between licenses, certificates, and transcripts?
Okay, when you come in and get a marriage license, we give you a license, and then when you go out and actually get married and send back, we give you a certificate. So you can get a license, and that doesn't mean you're married, because some people get the license and never use it within the 60 days. When they use it, mail it back to us, it's been, a marriage has been performed, they then get a marriage certificate that shows that they have had their marriage.
Well, you tell I've never been married, huh?
And the transcript, what's the transcript?
Well, the transcript is the information sent to the state of New York, certifying the marriage.
So you pay for all three?
Well, you get it in the $40 fee, you get it all at once. It covers all of them. But if you need a copy, it costs $10 to get a certified copy if you've lost your original or need it for other purposes.
Okay. Alrighty, Councilor Thompson.
John, what do you see in this year's future for your office?
Well, we're trying to get along with the money that is in the budget. It's tight. When I first took over as city clerk, there were 4 licensing personnel in the front office doing licensing. We're down to 2 full-time and a half-time person. We need those positions because I have to cover vacations under CSEA and sick leave and all these other times off, so the half-time person helps by looking up records and doing various jobs around the office. So we can get along with 2.5. I think we've talked about this before, similar to what was talked about in the mayor's office. Other licensing is done at the permit desk. It could be done in the clerk's office, and other cities have all licensing done in the clerk's office. The state of New York requires that marriage, conservation, dog license be done by the city clerk and no other office. So mine cannot move other places, but theirs could move into our office. And many times people come through the door and say, where do I get my bingo license? Or how do I get this? Because in the town of DeWitt, all licensing is in the clerk's office, I believe. So the reason it hasn't been done is I'm part of the legislative branch of government, and the other office is part of the executive branch, which would require a charter amendment for the public to say, oh yes, let's consolidate licensing into the city clerk. So no one's taken that step. I can't imagine the public would say, let's not, but talk about inefficiencies. Having 2 different spots to go get licenses is inefficient. Our office staff only deals with licensing. When you go to the permit desk, you might get somebody who is familiar with an entertainment license, you might get somebody who's not. So you're not getting a consistent application of those licenses, where if the function is just licensing, then the people become experts at that. And I think if you had it in one location, it would serve the public better, and then I could justify having a 3rd full-time position, which would then save you at least a half-time position over at permits. You know, the job could be done with 3 people, instead of what's being done now with, if you add permits, they have their own full-time person at least doing it.
Thank you.
Councilor Bay.
Yeah, I have one question. The 416 line.
Yep.
Travel, training, and development.
I'm sorry, Councilor, I can't hear you.
It's probably because I'm not used to the mic. My fault. So the 416 line, travel, training, and development.
Yes?
What does that consist of? Who's being trained?
Okay, most of that's our copier on the 415 line.
416. 16.
Oh, 416. Some of it is periodicals that I subscribe to as city clerk. Some of it is, I never take any travel. Almost always every year that budget doesn't really get used, except for, you know, I'm a member of the city clerk's organization. There's an annual fee for that, and it's for travel, training, and development, but I don't travel anywhere, so it's really just training and development.
I'm still going to make a case that we need more money in postage and freight. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Green. Councilor Driscoll.
Can some of the money be moved from the travel line to the postage and freight, or would that still not be enough?
During the year, when the budget is a planning document, and I plan the best I can, but you're right. During the year, sometimes I have to go to Mary and move one line to another, you know, get permission to move money. And we've done that this year, and we'll probably have to do it every year because we make good guesses, but they're not perfect.
Right. All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go far.
Yeah, don't go far. What page, James?
The Common Council budget is on page 59. Just to give an overview, I want to take one point of acknowledging, he's not here right now, but former Councilor Maroon is responsible for this.
All righty. So, we will.
Your budget is pretty much a status quo budget. Like most staff departments, it's driven by salaries. I think it should be higher for the counselors. I'm not just saying that because you're here, but I think if you look at other major city councils, we are the lowest paid city council in the state, and we have the smallest staff of any major city council in the state. So I know it's not popular, but I would say if any area of the budget needs to be beefed up, this is one of them.
We should have to go on referendum. I agree.
We all agree.
That would be on our docket, correct, John?
Yes, the last time the council received an increase, they voted it for themselves, but what they did is, my office at that time, Jim wasn't here, I don't believe, did the research. We looked at all the other city councils, we looked at what they were paying their councilors, staff and things, and we made a case for it. And then the Common Council went to the editorial board of the newspaper, which is always wise to do, and laid out their case for why their raise was warranted. And they then went forward and proposed a raise, which was well received because the factual information was there to justify it.
So we would follow a similar process if we were to consider it.
Since
again.
that worked well, I would suggest that that's what you consider going forward.
Thank you.
Councilor Green. Councilor Bay, you're done? Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I might. 1 second.
Well, I want to just ask
On this,
one quick question. I'm looking at the 300 line, office supplies, and the actual is almost $20,000, and it's reduced now to 4,800.
I'm sorry, are you looking at 415 line or?
No, the 300 on office supplies, 19,743,
Okay.
and now it's 4,800, 44,000.
Page 61 in the book.
Oh, right. What happened was we transferred money because last year we had bought all the chairs that we have up there now. That you see, remember the council chairs were replaced, and we put in, these chairs were recovered. All the things were done, so that was a one-time capital expense that we wanted to do some improvements to the chambers.
Okay, and then on the 415 line, professional services, it was 3,000 and it was adopted at 30,000 and proposed final at 40.
That's because that's where the money is if you have to hire an outside attorney. We don't always need to hire an outside attorney, but if we do, that's where you have the money in your budget to do so. Let's say there's a position where the corporation counsel feels she's at conflict by, has to defend the administration, and you have a different position, you would hire an outside attorney to represent your interests.
Alrighty. Okay, Councilor Bay.
all right, so I'm gonna take a shot at this. I've taken a shot at it every year since I've been here. So I'm gonna try it again. All right, this is not relative to the existing budget because that's pretty standard. But I'm still gonna make the case that we need 4 office aides, probably at 20 hours a week in the council chamber, because, I'm sure plenty of you get called to 4 meetings that all start at 7 p.m. sometimes, or, at 12 p.m. And we often can't and take abuse for showing up to a place for 10 minutes because the constituent doesn't understand that we have 4 other or 3 other or 2 other things we got to respond to. And other legislatures, to the clerk's point, tend to have more staff to help the council spread itself out a little bit and be more effective. I've made that case probably for the last few years at least, and no luck. Also, a not so sexy one, I guess, on the part of some people, but I believe it is. We need a charter change, in my opinion, so that we could hire a permanent lawyer who could use the title Corp Counsel as well, or at least amend the charter in some way, because obviously Corp Counsel is who could put items on the agenda. An outside lawyer cannot do that. But for those very reasons, the conflict of interest, which often comes into play, not at anybody's fault, but it is what it is. And I too have made that case, I believe, John, since I've been here, that
Yes, you
we
have.
need to have our own attorney. There's no way you can qualify a balance or of power when you're using attorneys, with all due respect, who can be hired and or terminated by the administration. And that would imply that all of the
only
and this is not calling into question anybody's integrity, but let's be clear, at the end of the day, their boss is on the 2nd floor, not the 3rd.
We do have a very unusual circumstance that occurs in the charter. The charter says the Common Council can go out and hire its own attorney when needed under conflict. But the way the charter is also written is only the Corporation Council can secure outside attorney. So what happens is we have recommended to the Corporation Council who we want hired when we've done this in the past. That's probably a very awkward system because she is either approving or disapproving, he or she, the counsel for the Common Council. So I do think a charter change for sure is needed there, that if you have the authority to hire somebody, you shouldn't have to be dependent on the Corporation Council to hire that person.
It's a very, very intelligently engineered process engineered by some administrators sometime in the past. You know, but we need to fix it because the council often, and I've made this complaint, is often waiting for legislation for months. In my case, almost 2 years for one piece of legislation, because there's always the argument, well, you know, the mayor has us doing X, Y, Z. Okay, I understand that. Then we need our own attorney inside the council office. I don't care if we have to clear out a closet, you know, but we need one. It makes sense to have one, and we're ineffective, as far as I'm concerned, without one. That's all I got.
Thank you,
Hold
Madam
on
President.
one second.
Thanks a lot.
The last, I'm speaking up right now, the travel, training, and development, who is that used for, the $2,500?
For your council office, it's for
Yeah,
counselors.
but where or when? is
Well,
what I'm
if you, for example, if you go on a government-sanctioned trip, it has to be like, let's say they're having a conference in Albany on housing authority, and you're chair of that committee, you want to attend, you would put a travel voucher through, and I then process it with the budget department, and that would be the line that would pay for your, you know, tolls if you drove your car, your gasoline, your meals, you know, there's set amounts for that. But there is, that's what, that money is for any council travel, you know, that is relative to the job, you know, right, related to your position.
Mr. Allen, that's an awfully small amount.
Once again, Counselor, let's say you decided to spend more than that, we would take the money out of the 415 line and add it to that line. We could move money around if we had to, but historically, the council hasn't traveled much, so that's why that line has been where it is. I mean, it just hasn't happened. There's been some travel,
Yeah,
but
there's been some, and historically, the council is changing, and they might see where they might want to do some trainings or go to different parts of the country, or of the state, to see how things are being done.
absolutely, Counselor.
$500 for 10 people, that's a little off, so.
That's another argument we've made over the years.
Well,
But it
if
can
you
be
want,
moved from the other line, from the four, okay.
or you could put an amendment to increase it at budget time if you want to.
Because that's a little bit below the
And we need a food budget for budget hearings. We need to, we're here. We need some breakfast and lunch.
Actually, we did recently get a credit card for the student youth program, so I suppose we could use that for this.
Okay. We're gonna be here for a couple hours. Stomach growl.
I know. Oh, I am so hungry right now, and I'm trying to keep it together.
I don't know. I didn't see it.
Basically, in a second.